You didn't cry at the funeral. You held it together in the hospital. You smiled through the meeting. You said I'm fine so convincingly that even the people who love you believed it. And then you went home, closed the door, turned on the shower, and fell apart completely, alone, where no one could see. You've been doing this your whole life, and you've never fully understood why. People think you're strong. People think you're cold. Some people think you don't feel things as deeply as they do, because you never seem to break in front of them. What they don't know is that you feel everything. More than most, you just learned a long time ago to schedule it. But psychology is here to tell you something that might change everything you think you know about yourself. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing suppressed, or damaged, or emotionally stunted about you. You are not someone who can't feel. You are someone who feels so much that you learn to protect it. Your tears are not hidden because you're weak. They're hidden because they're sacred. Think about what happens when you cry in front of other people. The moment the first tear falls, the room changes. Someone hands you a tissue. Someone hugs you. Someone says it's okay before they even know what's wrong. The conversation stops being about what you're feeling and becomes about managing the discomfort of everyone watching you feel it. Their discomfort becomes your responsibility. Your pain becomes a performance to be resolved. So over time, without consciously deciding to, you moved your grief off stage, not because you were ashamed of it, because you refused to let it become entertainment, because you understood on some level that real emotion is not a spectator sport. Psychologists call this emotional compartmentalization, the ability to separate the moment of experience from the moment of processing. And while it's often misread as avoidance, research tells a different story. Studies in emotional regulation show that people who process privately often report higher clarity after emotional release. Not because they're repressing, but because they're giving their emotions the full, uninterrupted space they need to actually move through. You don't cry less, you cry more honestly. But there's a second layer here, and this one runs deeper than most people expect. You learned, probably early, that vulnerability has a price. Maybe you cried in front of someone and they used it against you. Maybe you broke down in front of the wrong person and instead of safety, you got pity, that watered-down cousin of compassion that feels more like charity than care. Maybe you reached out at your lowest and found that the person you trusted couldn't hold the weight of what you were carrying, so you stopped handing your tears to people who didn't know what to do with them. This isn't emotional dysfunction. This is emotional intelligence. The hard-won kind that doesn't come from a textbook but from understanding. Through lived experience, which spaces are actually safe enough to come undone in. And here's the part that most people never say out loud. Some of you didn't always cry alone. There was a time when you let people see it, when you were open, when you cried in someone's arms and felt held instead of observed. But something happened, someone left, someone minimized, someone made a joke at the exact wrong moment, and without even realizing it, you made a quiet internal decision, not dramatic, not conscious, just a slow recalibration. You began building an emotional room that only you had the key to. Not because you gave up on people, because you decided that some parts of you were too important to risk in the wrong hands. Here's something no one talks about, the physics of private grief. When you cry alone, something different happens in your body. There's no performance pressure, no self-monitoring, no part of your brain calculating how this looks to someone else. It's just you and the feeling, moving through each other at full force. Research in affective neuroscience suggests that unwitnessed emotional processing, crying without an audience, can produce a deeper release of cortisol and emotional tension than public emotional expression, precisely because the self-monitoring centers of the brain aren't activated. You're not managing the experience, you're having it. You don't just cry alone, you cry completely, but here's what this costs you, and you already know it. Because you've become so skilled at holding it together, people stopped asking if you're okay. They assume you are. You became the one everyone else unloads on because you seem like you can take it. And the crueler irony, the more quietly you carry your pain, the more invisible it becomes. The people who need the most support often signal it the least, because they've spent years mastering the signal. You became fluent in everyone else's grief and illiterate in asking for your own. Now here is the question worth sitting with. Why does this pattern even exist? Why would the human nervous system develop a mechanism for private emotional processing when we're social animals built for community? Because not every community was safe. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hurdy's research into early human social groups found that visible vulnerability carried real survival risk in unstable environments. The individuals who learned to regulate in private, to show strength in public, and to process when the threat had passed, were more likely to survive social rejection and the cost of being seen as the weakest link. You weren't born broken. You were born adaptive. Your tears didn't disappear. They went underground, and underground they kept you alive. So here is what I want you to hear. Stop treating your private grief as a problem to fix. Stop telling yourself that crying alone means no one loves you, or that you're too closed off, or that something in you is fundamentally unable to connect. You connect You just connect selectively, with surgical precision, in spaces that have earned it. What you do need, and this is urgent, is at least one room where the door is open, one person, one space, one relationship where you are allowed to fall apart without managing the aftermath. Not because you owe anyone your vulnerability, but because even the most self-sufficient emotional architecture needs somewhere to release pressure. A dam with no overflow valve doesn't last forever. You don't need to cry in public. You need to stop crying completely alone. There is a difference between private and isolated. Protect one, escape the other, because the person who cries alone is not someone who doesn't need connection. They are someone who needs it so badly that they refuse to settle for counterfeit versions of it. Your tears are not a secret you're ashamed of. They are a standard you've set. People think you don't feel. What they can't see is that you feel so much, so deeply, so completely, that you gave your grief the only thing it truly deserves: privacy, space, and the dignity of not being watched. When someone assumes you're fine, they're not wrong about your strength. They're wrong about what strength costs. And if this video found you at the exact moment you needed it, if something in here cracked something open, don't scroll past that. Subscribe, because this channel is built for the people who process alone and need someone to finally say it out loud. And drop a comment below. What's the one thing you wish people understood about why you cry alone? I read every single one.